Hey everyone, and welcome to our tutorial on sort of understanding the basic layout of a C++ program. So in front of us here, I have our example C++ program pulled up in the Codiva IDE. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through line by line and kind of explain what all this starter code is all about. So let's jump right into it. So previously in our last tutorial, we talked about the compiler and the linker and how they work together to generate an executable file that's in machine code that your computer can understand and run. There's another step that I'd like to mention now, and that's a step that happens before the compiler, and it's called the preprocessor step. So what the preprocessor does is it will go out and grab any external references to code and pull them into your project or your C++ file. So this very first line here is an instruction for the preprocessor. What we're saying to the preprocessor by using this hashtag include and then in these brackets is we're saying, hey preprocessor, go out and grab the reference to the code for the IO stream. IO stream stands for input-output streams, right? In C++, we have this concept of streams, and so this is for the input and output of data. We use that stream down here, but we'll get to that a little bit later. All you need to know for this first line is that the preprocessor is going out and grabbing some code and bringing it in, and that code is included right at the end of this line. So the next line here is our using namespace line. This line you may not see initially in your C++. Once you start your C++, a new program in Codiva, it may just look like this, and that's totally fine. You're in a lot of projects, you're going to want to add this line to your project. We're going to return to this later in the tutorial. For now, we can just ignore it and move on to our main function. So our main function here is basically an entry point into the human readable instructions of our code. So this is an entry point into our C++ program. The main function has a return type of an integer. So an external program is going to call our executable program. It's going to call this main function, and our main function is going to return to that external program an integer. And in our case, at the bottom, it returns a 0. But we'll get to this in a minute. For now, all you need to know is that this main function here is our entryway into our C++ program. And it can also take arguments. Our main function can take or an external program can pass arguments into our main function. They're not mandatory and they're not always relevant. In this case, they're not really relevant to this beginner example. Our main function, the scope of our main function is established by using these two curly braces here. So these two curly braces establish the scope of our main function. So if you write any code outside of this curly brace, it's going to throw an error here because this just doesn't make any sense. It's outside of any type of scope, then it's outside the scope of our small C++ program here. So we're going to skip this line for now and just jump down to our return function, or our return line here, return statement. So all C++ main functions require a return type of an integer. And so 0 is our standard integer for a return type. And that generally indicates to the external calling program, the program that calls our main function, that indicates everything is fine. We return values in C++ with the keyword return. So this main function, just to outline it again, we have a return type of an integer. We have our function name, which is main, and that's sort of our denotes to any external calling program that looks for this global main function to run our program. We have our argument list here. We currently have no arguments to pass that we want to be passed in. We have our scope, the beginning of our scope, the end of our scope, and we have our return integer of 0, which indicates everything is fine. This return statement is ended with a semicolon. All instructions in C++ end with a semicolon as well. Okay, so that brings us to sort of the meat of our program. A C++ program can have any number of instructions. In our program, we have, outside of our return statement, we have one instruction that prints out hello Codiva to the console. If we run our program, we see over here, hello Codiva. Now, we can kind of dig in, we are going to dig into what this exactly does in our next lesson. But right now, what I would like to focus on is that one, that it prints out this string to the console, and two, I'd like to point out this prefix here, this std : prefix. So at the beginning of this lesson, you might remember that we had a line up here that looked like that was this. It was this line right here. It says using namespace std. Now, when we first talked about the preprocessor step and bringing in this code, we then moved down to this until we get back to it. What this namespace does is it organizes, namespaces organize names, and this std namespace organizes names for the functionality of our IO stream that we've brought in on this first line here. Now, if we don't have this line right here, we need this prefix to indicate that we're using the std namespace from IOStream. Now, if we use our std namespace, we don't need this prefix. So we can take that prefix out. Oops, sorry. We can take that prefix out and we can run it. And we see hello Codiva normally. Now, we don't have our prefix here, so let's try to run this without using the namespace. As you can see, we have an error here. Use of undeclared identifier cout. Did you mean std cout? And so now, if we try to run this, we get our error. It says there's a compilation error, run previous working version. I'm going to cancel. I'm going to add our std : prefix, which indicates that we're using the cout name from the std namespace. And we'll run it. And we see hello Codiva, so that works perfectly. So the thing that I'm trying to impress upon you here is the relationship between, in our starter, this is what our starter program looks like. I want to impress upon you the relation between this std prefix and this line here. I would encourage you to use this line. That way you don't keep having to add the std prefix every time you want to print something out to the console. Okay, so that just about wraps us up for this lesson. This was kind of a rough overview of your starter project line by line. It should look something like this. Oops. When you start out, as we talked about, preprocessor step that includes the code, our main function with the return type. Our main function starts here, it ends here. Our main function can take parameters, although we're not using any parameters in this, so we don't take any parameters. The first line prints out hello Codiva, and then we have our return statement at the end. Our main function is the entry point into our program, and our return statement needs to return an integer to indicate to any external calling programs that the running of our program is finished. 0 is the sort of standard output to show that everything's fine. And as we know in C++, all of our instructions end in semicolons. So that's a quick recap. I hope that knowing these things makes you feel more confident when you're opening your C++ program in Codiva. And I hope that that confidence translates to you being more confident in writing code as well. So yeah, thanks for sort of watching this. And I'm excited to kind of get into the more technical aspects of this language. Thanks.